Hi and welcome back. This is another 3400 that I have, a second one. I've been keeping this at an off-site location because I didn't have a lot of room. A few months ago I went to turn this thing on and it started up okay. Then all of a sudden it let the magic smoke out and the circuit breaker on this power supply popped. So something's happened in here. After it happened, I pushed the breaker in again and it worked fine. So it's obviously one of the mains rated capacitors that are inside it, similar to what happened with the Alpha Server 1000. So what I'm going to do is pull the power supply apart, pull out the bad capacitor and fix it up. To get these power supplies out, you've got to remove your expansion cover. This power supply supplies power to the back plane. It also supplies power to two hard drives, which I've removed, and also to this control panel. So you've got to remove that from there. And then once this is all loose, you can then remove this. Once you move this cable out of the way, you should be able to see there's a screw in there that is the one that needs to be removed. And the power supply now slides out. So that's the connector for the back plane. This connector goes to the mains socket, and power supply is inside. And it looks like this one is the culprit. You can see the burn mark. I don't think it's this resistor. I think it's come from the base of this capacitor and sort of gone out underneath that resistor there. So it looks like this one will need replacing. I pulled the capacitor out and it looks all good. There's a little bit of heat effect on the plastic there, but the capacitor seems to be alright. Hasn't bulged or anything. I measured it, it's the correct capacity, the ESR is good, so I think the capacitor's okay. Problem I did find though is the resistor that was next to the capacitor. This is the underside of the resistor, and it's obviously shorted out to a track on the board underneath where you couldn't see it. Here's the board where it happened. The resistor was here, between here and here. Tracks are under the board, and it was a bleed resistor for the capacitor that was back here that I've taken out. What I think's happened is, I don't know whether this has got hot over the years and sort of carbonised a little bit, or maybe a little bit of the paint's chipped off the resistor or something like that, and it's touched this track at some stage and blew a little bit of a hole in it there, and when it touched that track it tripped the breaker. Surprisingly, the resistor is still reading the proper value. It hasn't blown, but it's rather charred. Okay, so what I've done is I've used a bit of adhesive copper strip to repair the damaged track, and then I've soldered over the top of that to make a good connection right through, and then I've remounted the resistor off the board so there's a bit of an air gap underneath there so that the same issue can't happen again. Alright, I've stripped it down and removed all the bits and pieces. I've put the power supplies back in. This was the one that failed originally. It's got the new resistors now. I've also took this power supply out and changed the resistors in that one too, because they had the same issue. So I've put the terminator board in here, and I've put the CPU board in here just to give it a bit of load. So if we flick it on now, it's a bit hard to see, but the power good LEDs on here and the power good LEDs on there. Nothing went bang. So next thing to do is to plug this console back into the CPU board so that we can see something on the screen. Okay, so we've got the console plugged in and I'm getting response on the terminal, which is good. So now we'll just plug the memory boards back in. Okay, we've got 3 memory boards back in. Now what we do is we use this cable to connect the 3 memory boards back to the main board, because they've got a special memory interconnect that doesn't go through the back plane. Okay, got the memory hooked up now. So 52 mega RAM, 3 16 meg boards. No devices plugged in yet, still got to plug in the tape drive and hard drives and all that sort of stuff. So I've put a couple of hard drives in here, an RF31 and an RF36, and it seems to be okay now. When I first did the repair, the power supply did pop the breaker a couple of times when I first used it, but it's had about 18 hours of runtime now and enough time for the capacitors to reform, and it's good now. It powers up every time fine, so it seems to be okay. The only issue now is that it appears that the Ethernet isn't working, because this loop back, the light's not on there, and the indicator light to show whether you're on thick wire or thin wire doesn't come on at all. So what I might do is pull this panel out, change it for another one, and see if that helps. And I've got another one here. So I'll just plug this one in and see what happens. No, nothing on there either. Maybe there's an issue with the system board. So this is the top of the CPU board here. This is the connector that goes to the front panel. So it does the Ethernet and the console and all that sort of thing. There's some Ethernet circuitry in here, and I noticed that there are 2 miniature fuses. There's one here and there's one here. So if we test those, that one's fine. And that one's blown. So I think that's why the Ethernet's not working, because one of those little fuses is gone. So we have to get a replacement part for that. It's now a few days later and I've got a replacement part. I'm amazed that you can still get this part from the same manufacturer 30 years after this one was installed. Anyway, so you can see this is in a bit of a socket, so this can be removed fairly easily. And then I have my replacement part here. We'll put that there and we'll push it into the socket. Now it's time to put this board back in. reconnect all the various connectors. So there's 3 connectors on the board. This outer one is the DSSI connector that goes to the discs. The connector next to it here is the daisy chain connector that goes to the memory modules. And then this one up here is for the front panel. So now I've got that plugged in. And we can push that in there, along with a slot for the memory. Screw those down and we're ready to test. Okay, so let's see what happens. And as you can see, the loopback now has power and the indicator's on there, so fixing that fuse did help. Anyway, I think that'll do for this machine. It's been several months fixing it. Got there in the end though. Anyway, hope you found that interesting, and we'll catch up with you next time.